Radio Network.
There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up.
Rationalizations and the incessant search for scapegoats are the psychological cataracts that blind us to our sins. But the day has passed for superficial patriotism. He who lives with untruth lives in spiritual slavery. Freedom is still the bonus we receive for knowing the truth. Ye shall know the truth, says Jesus, and the truth shall set you free. Now, I've chosen to preach about the war in Vietnam today because I agree with Dante that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality.
This military type of response to a civilian disaster in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing, and we see these military type responses by civilian police more and more common in our everyday lives. We were witness to this once again in Ferguson, Missouri, where police responded with a military-type attack on peaceful demonstrators. We witnessed the disturbing discovery that an active-duty police officer in Oakland was encouraging demonstrators to riot and loot. With the advent of the Twitter world with a cell phone in everyone's hands, we have all witnessed countless acts of police brutality on YouTube. For those who have lived in the chaos of the inner city that has been plagued by an epidemic of drugs, crime, and violence since the end of the Vietnam War, police brutality is not a new issue that is suddenly lit before our eyes by the corporate media. Police brutality ultimately is a disease that has been in our inner cities for many decades. It's important to remember that, like any disease, it does not affect everyone in law enforcement, but it does affect some. The vast majority of people serving as state and local law enforcement officers are dedicated, hard-working men and women who put their lives on the line every day to keep the public safe and protected. With the tragic death of 2 police officers in New York, the media coverage of the issue of police brutality took a strange twist as conservative commentators began to lay the blame for the death of the 2 police officers on the hands of demonstrators who were protesting across the country and the world. While spreading the message that demonstrators are anti-law enforcement and anti-American, behind the scenes, oddly enough, in the land of internet irregulars, these same neoconservative forces are warning that President Obama is preparing for martial law and FEMA camps, and that these particular areas are being prepared for preppers, constitutionalists, people from the patriot community, militias, and any and all dissenters of the New World Order. The Fox News channel particularly has been using the blood of the victims, in this case, 2 innocent police officers, to paint a picture of what I like to call the Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson movement, fueled by what they describe as racial hatred towards white people. The character assassination of black leaders by the corporate media is an old and very dangerous game. There were hundreds of members of the clergy, and particularly black clergy, who played a pivotal role in getting their believers into the street for an issue that has plagued the black community for generations. Fox News and CNN spent little time examining the role of the church in demanding social justice in Ferguson and in Staten Island. Ultimately, these public lynchings of black leaders is an attack on the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. No single person in the 20th century did more to promote the use of nonviolence and peaceful demonstration as a way to force social change than Dr. Martin Luther King. His legacy was visible all across the world as people stood together for peace and justice. As the world watches our ability to freely assemble, to speak our minds, and to let our leaders know that black lives matter, as we watch this marginalized by the corporate media and particularly Fox News, they continue to resort to this same paradigm of hate and fear that has festered in America as a growing cancer since 9/11. Few are willing to accept the sad truth that the main reasons Americans do not understand why black lives matter is because for more than a decade we forgot that Muslim lives matter. So we are going to listen to a few news clips. First, we are going to listen to some comments by Representative Rangel from New York City and from the mayor of New York, de Blasio. And then we're going to listen to a few reactions to those comments that those commentators made. And, you know, I've taken short sound bites here because I think it's the psych op part of this that's very interesting, particularly in the response to this. And I want to emphasize from the start that the one issue, of course, that seems to be missing from this debate about black-on-black violence is the fact that our inner cities were deliberately flooded with narcotics, with cocaine during the Iran-Contra affair, and with heroin during the Vietnam War. But here are the comments by Rangel and by the mayor that had Fox News's news staff having to run for Depends.
Well, Governor Hannity, tonight it is mayor versus mayor here in New York City. In a moment, Rudy Giuliani will be here in studio to react to Comrade Bill de Blasio's comments attacking him on race in America. But over the weekend, the mayor doubled down on his emotionally and extremely personal comments about his own son following the grand jury decision not to indict NYPD officer Daniel Pantaleo in the death of Eric Gardner. Take a look.
It's different for a white child. That's just the reality in this country. And with Dante, very early on, with my son, we said, look, if a police officer stops you, do everything he tells you to do. Don't move suddenly. Don't reach for your cell phone. Because we knew, sadly, there was a greater chance it might be misinterpreted if it was a young man of color.
Now, the mayor continued that conversation on ABC's This Week, only to attack former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani for stating solid statistics regarding heightened black crime rate in the black community. And this is what he said.
I think he fundamentally misunderstands the reality. We're trying to bring police and community together. There is a problem here. There is a rift here that has to be overcome. You cannot look at an incident in Missouri, another incident in Cleveland, Ohio, and another incident in New York City, all happening in the space of weeks, and act like there's not a problem. There's something fundamental we have to get at here. And it's not going to be helped by accusing either the community or the police of having bad intention or not doing their job.
And there's a good reason for it. He's got a gun. You don't argue with a police officer.
Well, Charlie Rangel said that this is a cancer, in fact. Take a listen.
It's totally impossible to believe that someone can die and nobody is indicted. It is the cancer of racial hatred in this country by a handful of people that's tolerated by most people, including good police officers. I could take the DA to the grand jury, really.
So you can see from the start in this discussion the playing of the race card. Again, I want to emphasize that discussing the issue of violence in the black community without first discussing the issue of government involvement in the narcotics trade, you just really can't do this. And we are going to listen here to the reaction of how Rudy Giuliani wanted to deal with demonstrators because, you know, it really shows the intent here. And again, many of these demonstrations have been in opposition to the militarization of police. And you can hear Giuliani suggest here that he would have used force to end.
Almost hit with an axe. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of violence, not just a little bit. What you saw in New York City over the last couple of weeks would never, ever have happened while I was mayor of New York City. Never. So they would not have been allowed to control the bridge. But people don't get to take a public bridge from the public. I don't know if New York City officials realize if you close down streets in New York City, you'll kill people. We need 2-3 minutes to get people to the hospital.
Now, as we listen to Rudy Giuliani in this next segment, I just want you to think about the psychological part of this and this idea of blaming black youth from the chaos in the inner cities. This is certainly important from Rudy Giuliani. We'll hear him later talk significantly about how he put Italians in jail for the heroin trade. Of course, he also is guilty of ignoring everything that happened with cocaine distribution and Iran-Contra.
And yet, Mr. Mayor, we're going to keep you over here. I mean, have you stick around on our show because we want to address those very issues coming from President Obama, Attorney General Eric Holder, and Al Sharpton. When we come back after the break, we're back just joining us this morning. Former Mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, welcome back on the show. You were talking about that very issue that those leaders you just heard in that soundbite address. You're saying that's the 1%. They should be addressing the 99% of the violence that's happening in this country. Are they missing an opportunity?
Oh, tremendous! It's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. I mean, it's exactly the kind of misinformation, the kind of lying that creates this atmosphere of anti-police hatred. And make no mistake about it, it's hatred. If you hear what those people were saying at those rallies, kill the police, destroy the police. There was a lot more violence at the rallies in New York than was ever reported by any of the stations. Fox covered it. Most others didn't. Police officers punched. Police officers spat on. A police officer almost hit with an axe. I mean, there was a tremendous amount of violence, not just a little bit. What you saw in New York City over the last couple of weeks would never, ever have happened while I was mayor of New York City. Never. So they would not have been allowed to control the bridge. But people don't get to take a public bridge from the public.
So you can see in that clip how Fox News and Rudy Giuliani, of course, are totally ignoring the issue of the militarization of the police department and certainly the issue of police brutality. And you'll see over and over again, of course, that they come back to this Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson narrative. I'm just going to do one more little clip here. And that's not to, by the way, to criticize either of those two individuals. None of us get 100% of the truth all the time. And after that, I am going to play a clip of how I think that Dr. Martin Luther King, how he would have responded to those at the Fox News channel. And as I said before, I think that this lynching of black leaders and particularly black church leaders is a very old strategy. And it's really used to be drive a wedge between the white and the black church. So when you listen to it over and over again, it's kind of hard to.
Most black men in this country. We can't talk about that? You're racist if you say that? Frankly, I think you're racist if you don't say that.
So you were mayor, obviously, for a long time, 8 years. Al Sharpton was president in the city, running around demagoguing. How does it feel to you to see him now a key White House advisor in the Barack Obama administration?
Well, for Al Sharpton to be tearing down the grand jury, which is a little older than Al Sharpton, it started with the Magna Carta, is, and as someone who's been a prosecutor for more of his life than anything else, is an absolute outrage. I mean, the fact is, I've been before.
Now, of course, one of the difficulties in speaking out today grows out of the fact that there are those who are seeking to equate dissent with disloyalty. It's a dark day in our nation when high-level authorities will seek to use every method to silence dissent. Something is happening and people are not going to be silenced. The truth must be told. And I say that those who are seeking to make it appear that anyone who opposes the war in Vietnam is a fool or a traitor or an enemy of our soldiers is a person who has taken a stand against the best in our tradition. Yes, we must stand and we must speak. Over the past 2 years, as I have moved to break the betrayal of my own silences and to speak from the burnings of my own heart.
So we were listening to just a little bit of the importance of dissent and being in the streets there from Dr. Martin Luther King.